Okay, so we've talked about the religion clauses in general. I was thinking about this morning, and actually talked about this on the last video. You hear courts, so you've read this, you hear courts talk about the Establishment Clause this way, right? The Establishment Clause requires that the government neither promote, right, nor inhibit religion. But I was thinking this morning, actually, that's more of a statement of how the two clauses work together, right? When you see a fact pattern where the government is promoting religion, that's an Establishment Clause issue. And where you see a fact pattern where the government is interfering with religion, which is sort of the way I would conceptualize, right, inhibiting religion, that's more of a free exercise question. So again, we'll get to that later. But the big picture idea is when you allege that the government is promoting religion, one religion, right, or religion in general, or in rare cases, non-religion, when the government is promoting one of those things, that's an Establishment Clause case. So, as I mentioned, there are three different types of fact patterns where this kind of thing can arise. The first is government aid to religious institutions. The second is some kind of display, religious display on public property. And finally, there's the issue of public schools, right, and some kind of religious activity, prayer, display, or something going on in public schools. And each one of those implicates its own legal rules. So we're going to start at the beginning. And this is the most complicated one, right? What rule do you apply in a case where you see government aid, again, issue spotting? How do you know you're being tested on establishment? Well, one way you know you're being tested on establishment is if you see the government giving stuff, right? Whether it's money or materials, to religious institutions, right? If the government's doing that, you got an Establishment Clause question, and it's a government aid type of a case, right? So you're looking in that category, what's the test? The court has developed, you're used to a lot of different kind of goofy tests, right, in constitutional law. The court has developed, in this case, a purpose and effects test, right? The purpose, as we discussed on the prior video, the purpose of the policy or law, right, the aid program, the purpose must be secular, which means the purpose can't be to promote religion or non-religion. And furthermore, the court says, and after we get past that hurdle, we also want to make sure that the law policy program does not have the effect, the primary effect, right, of promoting or aiding, right, establishing religion. Now, then the question arises, right, how would a government program that gives material aid or money to a religious organization, how would that have the primary effect of advancing or inhibiting, right, religion? I guess we should talk for a second about policy. Why allow the government to give any aid at all, right, to a religious organization? Well, because religious organizations do things that are not religious. Right, they have soup kitchens, they have substance abuse policies and counseling, they have housing programs, right? So these are things that are not they're not dogmatic in a religious sense, right? They're programs that benefit society and are not primarily religious in nature. So there's no proselytizing, that kind of thing going on with some of these programs. So the policy has evolved, right, where the courts have said, all right, we're going to allow some, right, some interaction between the government and religious organizations, but we want to make sure that government money and government aid is not being used, right, either for the primary purpose of promoting religion, or that it's being used in a way where the primary effect is to promote religion. So the question is, how would a law or policy have that primary effect? And the court says three possible ways, right? If it fits into any one of these categories, the law is unconstitutional, right? So this is weird. The government would have to show, number one, that it has a secular purpose, and number two, that the primary effect is not to, right, advance or inhibit religion. Right, those are two elements that the government has to satisfy. The government can lose under element 2 if its program violates one of three rules, right? So when you're looking at your handout or your outline, You'll notice that in these Establishment Clause cases, particularly in the government aid cases, there are lots of ways for the government to lose. So let's talk about that. Two elements: secular purpose, primary effects. Okay, under primary effects, number one, if the law results in indoctrination, right, the law is unconstitutional. Policy, program, whatever it is unconstitutional. Results in indoctrination, results in, you've seen that before. That's called the causation test, right? So if the program causes indoctrination, what does indoctrination mean? You know, we're big, wow, right, we talk about this, big fan of words and the meaning of words, right? What does indoctrination mean? To indoctrinate is to cause somebody to believe something. Okay, so results in indoctrination means that the program would cause, right, somebody out there to develop religious dogmatic beliefs. That's what it means. So if the government is supplying math books, science books, history books, right, to let's say religious schools, I think I've mentioned to you I went to Catholic schools most of my life, so I'm familiar with all that. If the government is supplying those kinds of books or materials, right, rulers, pencils, pens, that's not going to result in indoctrination, right? That's not going to be a problem. If, on the other hand, the state is giving a religious school money to buy religious texts, right, Bibles, holy books of any kind, obviously then a court would have a problem with that, because that could result in indoctrination. The second way a court might find that a program has the primary effect of advancing or inhibiting religion, promoting or inhibiting religion, would be if it defines recipients by reference to religion. So you've got to think about that as well, and what would that look like? Let's say that we are the County Commission of Hillsborough County, and we want to drive traffic to Hillsborough Community College, and so we want to have a scholarship program, right, give students full scholarships to Hillsborough Community College. But we're tired of giving all the scholarship money to these, you know, brainiacs. So we want to have a good citizen type of a scholarship, right? Good person, good citizen scholarship, right? To get our good kids in free education at Hillsborough Community College. If we're going to do that, we have to think of criteria, right, for how you qualify for the good citizen scholarship to Hillsborough Community College. And if we were in class, we'd be doing this right back and forth, trying to figure out. And eventually I'd get somebody to say, well, let's see, if you're a scout, right, if you do scouting, maybe that would count towards good citizenship. If you do community service, right, that would help toward, that would count towards good citizenship. If you have no criminal record, if you have a clean driving record, right, that would count. And you keep, you know, I keep prompting for what else, what else, what else? And eventually somebody will always say, well, go to church, right? So let's add that to our program. So if you are a regular churchgoer, that also that counts. Okay, so what just happened was that we as the government defined recipients of the program by reference to religion. Okay, you cannot say in your law or program or policy that somebody can qualify for the program by being religious, right, or doing something religious. Again, because that would be encouraging religiosity, right? Religion, or again, in the rare case, not religion, but mostly it's going to be religion. So if you define who gets, right, the aid, because we're talking about aid programs, who gets the aid, who gets the money, who gets the material, if you define who gets it, right, that's the recipient, by reference to religion, anything about religion, the law would be struck down as unconstitutional, because then the primary effect would be to promote, right, religion. The third way that this can come up, the third category, if you will, of unconstitutional laws under the primary effects test would be laws, programs, policies that result in excessive entanglement between the government and the religious institution, right, or organization. The problem with the government giving aid or money to any organization is that often then the government has a responsibility to supervise how that money is spent or how the material is dispersed. And so that can, you know, if you want to think about this in practical terms, that usually looks something like an audit, right? If I'm the government and if I give you money, Now I have to audit your programs, right, the programs that you're running, and audit your books and all that, right, and make sure that you're spending the money I gave you the way it's supposed to be spent. This relationship can get so entangled, right, that you practically have the government running the religious institution that received the money, right, and that is something that the courts say we can't have. We cannot have the state essentially running religious organizations and still pretend that the government is not establishing religion, right? Again, the government aid program, how do you do that? How do you cut off that problem? Look for the straw man transaction, right? And the classic example of this is the reading that you did about vouchers, right? If the state was giving, we're talking about vouchers to attend school, right? So obviously the government pays for public schools, but then it's also giving parents vouchers to send those kids to private schools, right? Most of those private schools are religious. Now, if the government was directly giving money to the religious schools, then there'd be some kind of, right, direct relationship there, where the government then would have to, right, take responsibility for where the money was and how it was spent. If, on the other hand, the government gives the money to the parent, right, and says, there, we wash our hands of it, it's now your choice, right, where to spend that money. That's a whole different situation, right? Now it is the parent that is giving the money to the school, and the government is under no obligation to supervise the school or to audit the school, right, to figure out how the money is being spent. Again, you don't want to, the courts don't want to allow, at least in the current law, they don't want to allow too much entanglement, right, too much of a direct relationship between the government and the religious recipient of the aid, right? If that relationship gets to where the two are excessively entangled, right, then there's going to be a problem. And again, to get around that, you want to develop some kind of straw man, right? Somebody in between the government and the religious institution who's making the decision how to get the aid to, right, the religious institution. For the sake of keeping these videos limited in time, I'm going to end it there, but I will talk more about that in the next video, because the next two are going to be a little shorter, right? The endorsement test and coercion are more straightforward. But to repeat, if you see a government aid program, first thing you got to check is secular purpose, right? Is this have some purpose that has nothing to do with religion? Then you have to apply the primary effects test. Under that, you have to check, would this program result in as Laney is explaining, that would be a bad thing. If it results in indoctrination, bad. If it defines recipients by reference to religion, bad. Right? If it results in excessive entanglement between the government and the religious organization, bad, no good. So that, by the way, is called the Lemon test, even though Lemon, as you see from your reading, has been modified by a case called Agostini, right? So, and that whole thing was explained in the Mitchell case. The Mitchell case is the one you want to make sure you've read and understood here, right? So it's a Lemon test as modified by Agostini, as explained in Mitchell, but the test right now is what I just explained, right? It's those two elements and the three categories under element 2. Next up is endorsement. Until then, stay safe.